Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Yuri and today I will do an overview of Artemis 2 flight with Kerbal Space Program 2 and the Redux mod for Kerbal Space Program 2 that was recently released in demo version. And here you can see the SLS launching from mobile launcher 1 with crew of 4 kerbonauts. And here we go, we're going back to the moon. And actually the rollout of the SLS vehicle for Artemis 2 flight in real life in the time of recording for me is actually today. So it's very cool to see people returning to the moon. Also you can see on my replica in Kerbal Space Program 2, I actually added 2 strakes near the solid rocket boosters that was also added to the SLS vehicle in real life, because after first SLS launch in 2022 they added strakes near the solid rocket booster attachment points to reduce vibrations that was encountered on the launch from air currents near these attachment points. Also you can see the solid rocket boosters separation, and also you can see how the solid rocket boosters fall a bit up and sideways because they use similar separation motors as shuttle used, because in shuttle times they need to clear the wings of the shuttle. Also I think for Artemis 2 they a bit changed the direction of this separatrons, because they think I needed a bit more clearance from the core stage. Very subtle change, I think it's only like 15 degrees or something like that. Also you can see I prepping the launch abort system separation. So also you can see how the fairings and the launch abort system here separated, but in reality I later saw that the fairings would separate first and only then the launch abort system would separate from Orion spacecraft. But it also very slight timing difference, because the fairings would separate first and like only a couple seconds later the launch abort system would separate. And about separation, we're going to separate our ICPS, interim cryogenic propulsion stage. That was like X Delta 4 rocket stage, so you can call I guess SLS Delta 5 rocket if we're doing naming conventions by the second stage. So here I trying to do the orbit, very similar orbit that was Artemis 2 mission would do in real life, with first ICPS doing apogee race burn and with periapsis still in the atmosphere in case something goes wrong. And then the Orion spacecraft would do the perigee race burn to increase the perigee, and then the translunar injection, the TLI. And here we're going to do one of the like important parts of this mission, the Artemis 2, is proximity operation demonstration test with Orion spacecraft to evaluate its maneuverability. The crew of Artemis 2, 4 astronauts, would maneuver the spacecraft close to interim cryogenic propulsion stage and do some tests with this spacecraft. First they would approach the stage around with separation like around 10 meters, and also the stage then would maneuver on the side, and the crew would approach the side of this interim cryogenic propulsion stage. So the ICPS has on the side also a target that the crew can aim and do proximity operations and evaluate maneuverability, test docking procedures, and etc. So you can see I trying to do this in Kerbal Space Program 2 with my Orion replica. Here we're doing some wiggles to evaluate some maneuvers and going to backup. First, I guess the Orion would backup with its engines in reverse, so crew can also observe the stage. After this, the Orion would turn and fire its more powerful auxiliary thrusters to gain more distance. And then actually after this the crew would again turn to face the stage and observe it from the long range distance. So this demonstration test would evaluate the maneuverability and docking procedures of the Orion, but actually for Artemis 2 Orion doesn't have a working docking port yet. Like in Kerbal I have the docking port that Kerbal has, but for Artemis 2 flight Orion would have only like plate with a small window. Actually here I tried to see through the window from the astronaut's perspective how they would see the stage. Also later in the flight the ICPS, the stage, would deploy international CubeSats. There is 4 CubeSats positioned under the spacecraft adapter that would deploy through this like hole in it, and they are from Germany, Saudi Arabia, Korea, and Argentina, like a part of international collaboration in Artemis program. They would be deployed and perform like science on radiation belts and etc. Also after this, the stage would deorbit itself, would make a disposal burn, so it can safely burn up in atmosphere above uninhabited areas. Also about this orbit that the stage put itself and the Orion spacecraft after apogee race burn. The Orion now has the perigee inside the atmosphere. In case something went wrong, it can return. And now the Orion would complete its orbit by doing the perigee race burn to put the perigee much higher. And you would see a little mishap that I did, because I sometimes put the separation with the engine or like without, and here you can see I forgot that the engine was with the stage and it was already on, so I decoupled the next stage after the engine. So good that the Orion had the orbit inside the atmosphere at that point, so it could have returned if if I continued this mission with the mishap. But good that the Kerbal program has quick save. And we completed the perigee race burn, and now we can do the free return trajectory with the TLI maneuver, trans-lunar ejection, that the service module, European service module of Orion, would perform. And the orbit before the TLI, actually in real life, would take a full 24 hours for crew to take a bit of sleep, also perform a bunch of tests on life support, because this Orion would be the first Orion to have actual life support for the crew, check other systems of the spacecraft before committing to the TLI. Also, like in Kerbal, it doesn't take full 24 hours, because in Kerbal all things are smaller. Also, in Kerbal Space Program, you don't have an inclination after launching from your space center, because in Kerbal Space Program, it directly on the space center is directly on the equator, and the Kennedy Space Center has a slight inclination from launching from Florida. And here we're completing our TLI, and after this also the Orion spacecraft would put in the orientation with solar panels and back of the spacecraft facing directly to the sun. So the solar panels would have maximum sunlight, and I think they also have restrictions in this flight how much the Orion can be in the shadow and in the eclipse. Also the back of the Orion capsule, like with little with the skirt, has the optical laser communication device. So if the orientation would be right, like here the in game I have front of the capsule facing the Earth, the Kerbal, sorry. And if the real spacecraft would also face the same way to the Earth, not the kerbal, of course. The optical link wouldn't be able to have direct line of sight there, and it wouldn't be able to send much data, because again they need to have back of the spacecraft facing the sun. But if it would have slight orientation, and anyways they would test it with a bit of maneuvers, it can send much greater data and with better quality than the traditional communication devices. And here our crew arrived at the flyby point. In reality it would be the Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen, the Canadian astronaut from the Canadian Space Agency, again part of the cooperation in Artemis mission, and they would be able to observe the moon, especially the far side of the moon that we can see from the Earth viewpoint, and ideally it would be like lit up by the sun. Again, in different lighting conditions crew can observe differently, so lighting conditions is not the most important part of scheduling and planning the mission. The most important part is safety, crew safety, and like testing the Orion. But the crew has very unique opportunity and ability to use the best scientific instrument that people has, and it's human eye. And two people at the front, one with the camera and other with their own eyes, would observe the moon. By the way, the moon at the closest approach would be like basketball sized if the ball would be at your arm's length, and other two crew members at the back would observe how the two at the front observing the moon, and also would make their own observations, how to do like better observations, how better communicate, and etc. So it would be a very cool part of the mission, and a very cool scientific part of the mission, because they would be able to observe parts of the moon that no human eye has ever saw, because Apollo missions have had their own a bit different path of the orbit, but this mission actually would be probably the farthest people got from Earth, but some Apollo missions was more fast in terms of the return speed. And about the return, for Orion, usually the return path plans the big skip from the atmosphere to manage thermal loads and extend range of the landing operations with the extended cross range. But on Artemis 1, the heat shield experienced issues because after first skip, heat shield cooled and outgassed and cracked the ablative material that it has. And the Artemis 2 has actually the same heat shield design as Artemis 1. So before the new heat shield would be available for next missions, on this slide the return re-entry path would be presented more closely to Apollo re-entries, where instead of big skip, the capsule would just maintain the altitude in the more thicker parts of the atmosphere to manage thermal loads before the final re-entry and splashdown. And in the Kerbal Space program I tried to do more like realistic approach with a glide path before the splashdown with the capsule, but I didn't plan right the trajectory, to be honest, so I had to do more truly direct trajectory to make the splashdown of the capsule and not land on some continent. To be honest, the crew on the real mission would perform a ton of cool experience, testing different communications, testing radiation shelter, testing samples and vitals of the crew before and after the flight. Also, you can see the mobile launcher still standing on the pad after my Kerbal mission. So, very cool flight, and it could happen very soon. If after today's rollout the wet dress rehearsal and dry dress rehearsal with the crew would be conducted successfully, launch can be early February this year, so 20 days away. It's very cool, and if you watch this far, thanks for watching. You can press like, subscribe, also I have the donation link. And again, thanks for watching.
Say to me no more, Apollo, say to me the job is done. And I say your words are hollow, and our work has just begun. And our work has just begun.